In this movie, we'll cover how to get going with recording live audio into Logic. First, we need to go over some initial setup options to get the most out of your recordings. Once these are in place, we'll be busy tracking in no time. Here we have a new project we just started. Notice the name says Untitled because we haven't saved it yet. Here's a really good tip. You should always save your session before you record anything. This automatically sets your audio recording path to your project folder, so that way you don't have to do it manually. Let's go to File, Save. And here we'll give our project a name. We'll call it Recording. And I'm going to save it to my desktop. I want to make sure I organize my project as a folder and keep the audio files folder checked. That way any audio files I record in this project will end up in my project folder. Okay, so I click Save, and now notice the name of the project shows up at the top. It's called Recording. Now, assuming our audio interface is properly set up, as we talked about previously in this course, we'll need to decide on 3 options for the audio files we'll be recording: file type, sample rate, and bit depth. Let's first choose file type. Go to the Global Preferences, Logic Pro, Preferences, Audio. Here in the Global Audio Preferences, let's click over to the General tab. Here we can choose our audio file type. Right now it's set to AIFF. We have the option of making WAV, BWF, broadcast WAV files, or CAF files. These are all uncompressed file types. I like to choose WAV. That's an industry standard. There's no sonic difference between any of those file types, though. Now, while we still have the global preferences open, we can change the bit depth we'll record to. If we go to the Devices tab, we can see down here that it's set to 24-bit recording. That's the default recording bit depth, and I recommend you leave it there. If you uncheck this button, you'll then be recording at 16 bits. I recommend 24-bit. It's the best audio quality you can record to in Logic. It will take up more disk space than 16-bit, but it won't have as much dynamic range. Notice also in here that software monitoring is checked. We should leave this on to monitor, but not commit or print any effects into your tracks as you record. Unless you have a more complex hardware monitoring system in your studio, I recommend leaving this box checked. Okay, now let's go into the project settings. So we'll close the global prefs, go into File, Project Settings, Audio. Here we can choose our sample rate. Right now it's set to 44.1. I'm going to go ahead and change it to 48. I typically like to choose higher sample rates, higher than 44.1 when I'm recording. Again, it results in higher quality audio. The only trade-off is disk space, but hard disks are really cheap these days, so I like to record at the highest sample rates I can. Okay, let's close our project settings. Now we're ready to check our input signal. I've got my guitar connected to input 1 of my interface, and as soon as I hit the I button, I should hear a level on track 1. Now I just want to double confirm over here that track 1 is set to input 1, and it is. So since my guitar is connected to input 1 of my interface, as soon as I hit the input button, I should hear a signal. Let's see. Great, I'm hearing a signal, but you notice the incoming level is a little high. It didn't quite overload the channels, but it's getting there. Now your first instinct might be to turn down the track fader, but remember that comes downstream of your input level. The only way to really control the input level coming into your computer is on your interface itself. So you want to turn down the preamp gain or trim on your interface to control the level. I'm going to do that now. Okay, I turned that down a little bit, and let's see our input now. A little more reasonable level coming in. I don't want to overload as I'm recording. Now, when I'm checking my instrument coming in, I've been hearing a little bit of a delay as I play. This is caused by something called latency. I like to call latency the dirty word of digital audio. Because anytime you send audio through your computer, you have to deal with the time it takes to get through the computer system and out to your headphones. Computers have to use a memory buffer to stay ahead of what's coming in. No digital audio workstation, including Logic, is exempt from this. Logic does have some great ways to deal with it, though, and minimize any problems. Let's go back to our global preferences for a second, under the audio section. Now here you notice our I/O buffer size is set to 1024 samples. Now that's set pretty high. It'll give us a lot of processing power, but it's going to cause a lot of latency. In fact, down here it tells me the resulting latency is 45.6 milliseconds. That's pretty high. It's going to cause some weirdness and some delay as we're recording. Let's go up into the I/O buffer size and change it to 128. There we go, that's better. You can see our resulting latency is a lot smaller. Let me check the guitar and see what that sounds like. Not only does it sound better, but it feels better as I play the guitar. I'm not getting that delay I was getting with a higher buffer size. There's one other place you can deal with the latency. Under the General tab here, notice Low Latency Mode is already checked. That's also going to help because it selectively bypasses plugins and other processes that'll lower the latency when we record. So if you're experiencing latency, now you know 2 places to go. You can set your buffer size lower and make sure low latency mode is turned on. Okay, we're very close to recording. A couple more things. What are the files going to be called when we record? Turns out that files follow whatever your track name is. So audio 1 will give us files called audio 1, 01, audio 1, 02, and so forth. That's not very descriptive. So we want to change the name of our track. But we also want to load up a good guitar patch to listen to when we record. So let's do that. Go to the library, and let's choose electric guitar, crunch guitar, cinnamon tweed, and close the library. Now notice our track got named cinnamon tweed after the patch. Let's actually take a listen to what this sounds like. Cool. That's one of the Amp Designer patches in Logic. And now, because our track is named cinnamon tweed, that's what our recordings will be named too. If you like that, that's fine. You can also go and double-click in here and call it something more descriptive and simple like guitar. Even still, guitar is a more descriptive name for our files than audio 1. Now let's add a drummer track to our project so we can play to something other than a click track. It's much more fun to play to one of Logic's new drummers. So I'll click the plus button and I'll add a drummer track. And I'll click create. And here's our default drummer. I'm going to change the style to songwriter. I'm going to choose a different drummer, Darcy. Let's hear what she plays. That's pretty cool. But let's turn up the tempo a little bit. Click right where it says BPM, and I'll move it up to 140. Now let's hear it. Great. I'll close the drummer window. Now I want to just make sure my track is record enabled. So I get the blinking R button, and that tells me that my track will record when I hit the master record button. Okay, here we go. I can either click this button or type R on my keyboard to start recording. Notice my region was named guitar number 01. Let me go out to our desktop for a second, just to show you what we made here. Here's our folder called recording, and inside is our Logic project called recording, and inside there is our audio files, and there's our resulting first recording, guitar number 01.wave. So now you know all the required steps to set up Logic to record audio. In other movies in the recording chapter, we'll get into all the working techniques and different styles of recording, from multiple instruments to punch recording to comping multiple takes.